Thanks for watching News Center Maine Plus. I'm Brian Yacono. There are a lot of Maine candidates in the running for political office in 2026. Our team will be interviewing them one-on-one and posting them right here for you to watch in full. This is an effort to keep our community informed before you cast your ballot.
Angus King III, thanks for sitting down with us.
It's great to be here. Good to see you, Phil.
So you've never run for elective public office before, right?
That's right.
Okay. So do you think it takes a little bit of audacity to seek the top job in the state right away? Like, did you ever think of maybe city council or state legislature first?
Yeah, look, I spend a lot of time thinking about how can I have the most impact on the most lives if possible. And right now in this moment, I realize that my background may not be the ordinary course to running for governor, but I don't think this is an ordinary moment. And I'm not sure that Augusta solutions are necessarily what we need right now. My background is I've been spending my life building things that have been solving problems to help people. And a lot of that work is, well, I'll tell you, and I think right now we've got to really be focusing on different solutions. People who are willing and able to bring people together and get things done. I think that's what we need right now. I'll tell you a story about different, and since we're talking about politics, it'll be a story that's about manure. A couple of years ago, I thought if we were going to have clean air, clean water, clean energy here in Maine, we needed to bring everybody into the table. So I got utility folks and dairy farmers and clean energy and community leaders and thousands of cows. And we took something that they have a lot of, manure, and turned it into something that we all need, renewable energy. That project that's up in Clinton, Maine, is turning out energy for thousands of homes and factories. It's lowering emissions for all of us here. It's created some good jobs, and it's doing it without adding costs to Maine families.
I'm glad you brought that up because we were supposed to do our interview there at the site of your business, and the big snowstorm derailed that plan. So here we are in our nice, warm, cozy studio.
This is more comfortable.
But let's get right to that project that you constructed. Did you just say manure?
Absolutely.
So you turn cow manure into
clean energy
and heat that heats Maine homes and businesses. Can you give us sort of a, version of that anyone who's not a scientist would understand?
Absolutely. Manure, as it stands right now, these cows, they work 24/7, right? They never take the day off, never take a night off, and never get a holiday.
They need a union, I think.
And they produce manure that whole time. And so that manure, if you just leave it be, creates methane all by itself, and that methane goes up into the atmosphere and is a pretty bad greenhouse gas. So we figured out we were going to take that manure, put it into this digester, which is a gigantic football field sized tank that holds millions of gallons of manure at a time. And when that manure creates methane there, we clean it up and we put it onto the pipeline, and that pipeline runs to heat, again, homes and factories in Maine. It reduces emissions because that methane isn't going up into the atmosphere. It creates good jobs, and we did it without adding costs for Mainers.
This is when people say cow farts contribute to global warming. This is
so
kind
does
of
cow poop. That's right.
So what is this show about you as the word you like to use to describe yourself? Builder. I'm a builder.
Yeah. I think it's a builder, and I also think it's thinking differently, right? When you think about how do you bring all of those people together, it shows a couple of things. Number one, there's not a single poop joke I haven't heard. But the second is, I know something about turning some things around. I know how to bring people together to get things done. You apply some common sense on common ground, you listen to all the best ideas, and then you have a bias for action, and you know how to get things done, and then you're accountable for the dollars and the results. I think that's exactly the kind of leadership we need right in Maine right now, and that's why I'm running for governor.
Yeah, the shorthand I've used to describe you is businessman, Angus King III. But maybe clean energy entrepreneur is a better word. Tell me about your experience with other forms of clean energy, such as wind and solar, which is going through a hard time. The Biden administration supported certain subsidies for those industries. Governor Mills, who you're running to succeed, has as well. The Trump administration, we're in a different era. Less support. Even offshore wind leases being canceled. What have you done to move the ball forward on those projects?
Sure. A lot of people sort of talk about clean energy and what do we need to do. I've actually built it. I've spent a lot of my career building projects. So before the renewable energy company here in Maine with the cow manure, I worked on solar and wind projects around the US and then around the world, leading teams that built those projects. And look, yes, President Trump has attacked that industry and he's set it back somewhat. But what we need right now is we need clean energy. We need it soon. We need it to be lower carbon and lower cost. And I think the good news is that wind and solar, when done properly, can deliver on those requirements and those promises. We can make it so that it's lower cost for Maine families, and that's, I think, a really important piece for us.
Well, the lower cost is a big part of the energy plan you're rolling out as a candidate.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you lower costs on energy in all of its forms?
Yeah, there's a lot.
And by the way, there's a time when, everyone in Maine knows in the winter, electricity bills and natural gas bills are spiking in a way people haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, and oil bills too, I would add.
Yes.
Right, Maine is a huge user of oil, bigger than any other state in the country.
Still a majority. It was 62%, but now it's down to 52%.
We're making progress, but it's a little bit every day. And unfortunately, we're actually using more oil to generate electricity today than I think we should be, because our planning process has put us in a place where we end up having to burn a lot of oil to generate electricity when it's cold outside and when it's dark and solar panels aren't working.
So what are some of the innovations, as well as permitting and
Yeah.
other processes that have to occur that you would want to occur as governor to move things forward?
Yeah, the first thing you mentioned is around permitting, right? We have billions of dollars of projects in Maine that are waiting for permits. That's not just energy, that's all kinds of different projects, but that gives you a sense. It takes a really long time here in Maine, longer than in a lot of other places, and that adds cost. It just makes it harder to build projects here in Maine, and we've got to find a way to do that better. Australia and Europe are building solar for about 3 times cheaper than we're building it here, and we can do better than that.
So how do you do it? Do you put a deadline on the panels, the bureaucracy that reviews these proposals?
Yeah, I think we can absolutely do it still, preserving the natural environment that we have. I don't think it's anything about lowering standards, but it is about bureaucracy. It is about cutting red tape. It is about finding ways to limit times, for example. So there's a bill in the legislature right now that talks about exactly that. How do we limit times for renewable energy projects? I think that's the kind of thing we've got to do, because time kills projects, right? The longer it takes, the more likely you are to have interest rates change, or to have steel prices go up, or to have tariffs take effect, or to have President Trump do some other crazy thing to make your project not economical. So I think we really can do a lot on the permitting front. The next thing we can do to lower costs is make sure that we're using the grid that we have effectively. We have an electrical grid that delivers electricity to all of us, and the utilities incentive is just to build more. They make more money if they build more. We should give them incentive to do better if they bring costs down. There are a lot of things we can do to make our grid more efficient, to make it more effective, using technology, using sensors, using AI, to bring down the cost of operating our grid and to make it more efficient for Maine people. And ultimately, that's going to lower costs for us as well.
You just said AI.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk across the country about AI, artificial intelligence, data centers. I think there's maybe a lot of fear or misunderstanding. In Lewiston, the city council just rejected
7-0.
a plan for a data center. What's your view? Do they have a positive or negative impact on the local economy or the environment?
Yeah, I think what's most important is that we make sure they have a positive impact. If we're going to have data centers here in Maine, if they want to come to Maine and put in a data center, they're going to have to bring their own power or make sure that they're covering all of the costs that might come to ratepayers. And candidly, I think they should be able to show that they're bringing costs down for ratepayers here in Maine. I think that's possible, and I think that's absolutely what we've got to do in Maine to make sure that we don't pay that price and that the benefit doesn't go to an out-of-state tech company.
Before you were in the renewable energy business, you were in the affordable housing business, helping build housing across 6 states.
Yeah.
Tell me what you did, what you accomplished, and how that applies now to one of the top problems in Maine, which is the housing shortage.
Sure, I was going to say, look, housing is a huge problem for our state. It's a huge problem for families. It's not just about the numbers. It's about, can people find a home to live? Can young people find a place when they move here? Can families find a place when they want to expand? Can people move for love or money or some other reason here in our state? Or work.
Well, that's money.
That's money, right. And I think that's really holding us back. And fundamentally, we've just made it really hard to build housing. And I think there's a lot of opportunity we can turn that around. When I was building housing, we were building affordable housing, so it was mostly taking properties that needed a lot of work and we turned them around, put in that work.
So that's renovations.
Yes, exactly. A lot of renovations and making those into like new properties for people who had never had a new kitchen and a new bathroom and all of those things. So it was very rewarding work. It was very helpful for the people who live there. And it was capital A, affordable. But a lot of the people who live in those properties are teachers and policemen and firemen, sort of people who actually make our towns run and function. I think it's important. Here in Maine, we've got to do more of that, but we also have to just build more housing. We are just short on housing, and the more housing you build across this sort of set of needs for the middle class, for people who are still looking for housing, that can help everybody up and down. So we've got to figure out ways to build more housing across the spectrum here in Maine.
I mean, we have this number that's been kicking around, 80,000, right, over the next 5 years need to be built to meet the projected demand. The governor has said during her 2 terms, she's either built or in the pipeline 6,000 total units. In her State of the State address, she talked about another 825, assisted by $70 million in state funding. We'll see if that passes the legislature. Right. I don't want to say these are drops in the bucket, but it's incremental.
That's right.
So how do you tackle that number if you're governor, 80,000 units, which would happen in your first term?
That's right. First of all, I think 80,000 is probably more than we need. And so I think we want to revisit what that number is. But it's way more than what we're doing, and it's way more than what we have. And I think we've got to, number one, you've got to start with urgency. This is a huge problem for our economy. It's a huge problem for the people who live here. It's a huge problem for the people who want to come here. And so I think, number one, it's about urgency. Number two, it's about what can the state do? The state right now has a process that is very convoluted. We make it harder because of the processes that we have. It is more expensive to build affordable housing than it is to build market rate housing. That seems backwards to me.
Why is that? Is it because of regulations?
Process and regulation, and a lot of rules that end up starting with good intent, but you end up with sort of death by 1,000 good intentions. And I think there's a lot we can do at the state level to coordinate and streamline that process so that we can do a better job. We also need to help towns that want to build housing, like Brunswick and Biddeford. How do we help them move forward? How do we help them with infrastructure? There's a lot of innovation that's happening in other states that we can bring here.
Mm-hmm. Your father,
yes.
Senator Angus King, I guess Angus King II.
Yeah, junior,
2-term governor, 3-term senator.
Yeah.
Getting back to my first question about the audacity of running for governor in your first race, I mean, if your name weren't Angus King, would you be making this race?
Yeah, look, I feel a lot of people ask about that, and it's a fair question, and they ask it sort of, do you feel like you've got an unfair advantage that Angus King is your dad? And the answer is, of course. But the reason for the answer, I think, is a little bit different. It's like asking Wayne Gretzky's kid as he steps out on the ice, do you think it helped you that Wayne Gretzky was your dad? And the answer is yes, but it's when you get out on the ice, the name on the back of your jersey doesn't matter. You still have to do the work, you still have to shoot the puck and grind it out in the corner and skate. So it doesn't help you in that way. But I grew up having dinner and breakfast and all kinds of time with what I candidly believe is one of America's great public servants. And I got to spend time with him talking about the importance of integrity and honesty and being true to your word, about the importance and the ability to work in a bipartisan way, to listen to the best ideas, and how do you get things done for the people of Maine. And I think that advantage, having learned those lessons and having them be part of me, I think is a huge advantage and one I feel very, very lucky to have. But I'm running this race on my own and based on the work that I've done. And I feel like there's real opportunity, again, for an outsider who hasn't spent their life in Augusta to really bring something new and bring a really different perspective to the people of Maine.
You said in your announcement video, which people can watch on your website,
Sure.
I think that's called angusforgovernor.com.
Yeah.
You say in that video, if you know my dad, you know my values. Well, what are your values?
Yeah, I think it's what we just talked about. I think it's really about integrity, being true to your word, but also really about listening, about paying attention to what are the true needs of people and how are you going to get there in the most effective way. How do you have the most impact for the biggest number of people in the best possible way? And that sometimes means bending a little and yielding and overcoming. Sometimes it means really leaning in. Sometimes it means listening and bringing everyone together and then finding that common ground. I'll tell you, George Smith, who you probably know, one day a guy walked up to George, who he was the head of Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, said, George, I think you and I disagree on about 90% of the way the world works. And George, without skipping a beat, said, well, then let's work on the 10%. And I think there's a nugget of a path there on how do we bridge this moment of real division in our country and frankly in Maine, and how do we make sure that we're focusing on the common issues that everybody faces at the kitchen table, right? Can they afford their groceries for breakfast? Do they have a decent roof over their house, over their head? Can they heat it? And are their kids getting an education? And can their parents access health care? If we really focus on those common issues, I think we can get a lot done here in Maine, and that's part of what's driving me forward. Is I think in this moment of loud division, I think there's real merit in having someone who's spent their career building things outside and has a lifetime of experience in bringing people together.
You've kind of anticipated and answered what was going to be my last question. I'll ask it anyway.
Sure.
You're in this competitive Democratic primary with at least 4 other people. I'll name them: Shenna Bellows, Hannah Pingree, Nirav Shah, Troy Jackson. Mainers know who they are. They've all held public office or public positions. What is your closing argument then to Democratic voters who say they want a proven winner, who can actually win in November, not just win a June primary,
Sure.
and maybe just someone with more experience to do the job on day one?
Yeah. I used to have a professor who said, I don't care what school you went to, I care what school of experience you went to. And my experience is creating jobs, creating clean energy, building homes, building companies, and doing it all by bringing people together, knowing how to get stuff done, and then ultimately knowing how to listen, have a bias for action, and then being accountable for the dollars and the results. I think that kind of experience is exactly what we need right now. And candidly, I don't know that being in the legislature is the right experience for the chief executive in a moment where we're going to have a lot of division and we need to get some really fundamental things done. We have some really big challenges in our state. I think ultimately they become opportunities as opposed to simply challenges, but around housing, around energy, around healthcare, around education, around our economic development. These are things that are going to require us to bring people together. And the background that I have, I think, is actually tailor-made to this moment. I have become frustrated with the sort of 2 chasms in our lives. One is the chasm between policy and practice. Right? A lot of times policymakers with good intention end up doing something that makes no sense in the practical world. And it makes it harder, for example, to hire people, harder to grow your business, harder to create good jobs here in Maine. The other chasm is the chasm between people and politics. My whole bet is that fundamentally people are upset and don't like the loud division that's tearing us apart. It adds to the anxiety at home. They're already worried enough about can they afford their groceries or their heat, and they want someone who's able to bring people together. And I think that's a really important part of this story, is because I think that's where most people live. The loud sort of division on either side certainly takes up a lot of the airtime and certainly comes through our phones every day. But I think there's a real opportunity here in Maine especially to bring people together in common cause to solve these big problems in a transformational way. And that's what I'm excited to do.
Angus King III, thank you so much for sitting down with us, and good luck with the campaign.
It was a pleasure. Great to see you, Phil. Thanks for the time.